After Trump promised 40 times, it looks like the U.S. and Iran have reached a deal to end the war. Sort of. Kind of. Maybe. Over the weekend, it was announced on Trump's birthday, no less, that the U.S. and Iran had come to an agreement to agree to a deal to fully end the war. And while so far the U.S. is refusing to put out the actual text of this international pinky promise, it's leaving a lot of experts wondering, what was this all for? The Strait of Hormuz will now be under the control of two Middle Eastern countries, one of them Iran. When it wasn't before, the oil markets are going to need weeks, if not longer, to get back to something that looks like normal. There's no indication about how much money the U.S. is giving Iran, and most importantly, there's no agreement about nuclear programs or materials. I'm going to try and do my best today to break this down, and while I would love to talk about the bizarre spectacle that was the UFC cage match for the president's birthday at the White House, where the president still fell asleep in the front row, instead, this is way more important. It's Tuesday, June 16th, 2026. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Hermes. You know how every social media platform is basically engineered to make you angry and keep you scrolling? That's not an accident. Outrage performs better than nuance, so the algorithm feeds you outrage. I see it every day as someone making news content for a living. The loudest, most biased takes get the reach. The careful, fact-driven stuff like I do my best to bring you here gets buried. That's why I joined SaySo. It's a brand new news app just launched, built by a group of former journalists and engineers who asked, what if we build news from scratch for people who actually want to be informed instead of people who just want to keep scrolling? No algorithm optimizing for outrage, no AI slop, just vetted creators delivering fact-driven coverage, curated so you can know what's going on in 5 minutes and then get on with your day. If you're the kind of person who is intentional about your sleep, your workouts, your work, what you eat, but your news diet is just whatever your feed throws at you, this is for you. The same energy finally applied to how you stay informed. I'm one of the first creators on SaySo, and my favorite feature is that I can link my sources right in the video. That way, you know how I'm telling you the truth. And if you sign up now, you'll be one of the first users to join. You can download SaySo. The link is in the show notes and the description. Go check it out and be as smart as you know you are. All right, let's get back to the show. On Saturday, the president announced on Truth Social that the deal with Iran was close, while criticizing the Obama deal that Trump ended in 2018. It was the 11th hour of this latest round of peace talks, and he ended this statement by threatening nuclear war. He said, hopefully this process will all work out quickly, easily, and smoothly. If it doesn't, we have the ultimate alternative, hopefully never to be used again. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I know that these Truth Social posts are always somewhere between farce and addled ramblings, but this is an even more explicit threat to use a nuke in this war than when he said he was going to end a civilization. There's somehow more wiggle room in that than there was in this. This is the President of the United States publicly threatening to drop a nuclear weapon in a war on Saturday. It's Tuesday, and I have yet to see a single major outlet cover this seriously, deal or no deal on the table with Iran. And I know it's not really what we're talking about today because there is maybe a deal here on the table, but I didn't want to gloss over it because this still matters. But moving on Sunday, that was the big day. Trump, again on Truth Social, said the deal is now complete and that the blockade the U.S. military has had likely illegally on the Strait of Hormuz in the last 6 weeks is over, and the strait is now immediately opened. Well, it turns out that none of that was really what you would call true. So what this turns out to actually be is called a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, and it's basically an agreement to make a deal. Now, these aren't uncommon in international agreements. Ending wars is big and unwieldy, and there are a lot of moving parts, but by no means would any real foreign policy expert call this a real deal. When it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, well, it didn't open immediately. As I'm recording, just 2 ships have made it through, and the U.S. blockade is still there. The president and vice president apparently signed a digital version of the agreement on Sunday, the president's birthday, but then the Iranians waited until after midnight their time so they wouldn't be signing it on Trump's birthday so that it wouldn't look like a birthday present to him, which was both petty and also, I guess, diplomatic in a way. But the official signing will take place this Friday in Switzerland, according to Trump. So, what's in this thing? Well, we don't know. There is reporting coming out of the Iranian side, but so far the White House has refused to release the terms, just like the last few rounds of peace talks when a deal was sort of close, sort of not close. But this time it's weird. But here's what the reporting has said. First, there will be an agreement on the memorandum of understanding within the next 30 days. So, a deal to agree to a deal. By the middle of July, an immediate ceasefire for 60 days, and given how little ceasefire has actually meant since April, who knows what that really means. But then we get to the real stuff. First, the money. The U.S. and the UN will agree to lift economic sanctions and let Iran sell oil again immediately, which is a big jump. Iran also said the Strait of Hormuz will have fees and will be jointly controlled by Iran and Oman, which means when ships do get up and running again, instead of the waterway where 20% of our oil flows through being an open international strait, those companies will now have to pay extra to do what they used to do for free. And it's not like famously charitable shipping and oil companies are going to just eat that cost out of the goodness of their hearts. So somewhere down the line, we are all going to be paying more. This is one of the biggest blunders in the MOU for members of the intelligence community, current and former, who say that the U.S. allowing Iran to have control of the strait is just giving them an on-off switch whenever they feel like throwing a temper tantrum in the Middle East. Quote, "We have now handed Iran de facto control over the strait, a weapon more powerful than any nuke," is what an intelligence official told CNN this week. So, not great. Now, the White House talking points it's putting out say Iran only gets to control the strait if it holds up its end of things. But there's no way to know or enforce that unless we go back to war, which would likely mean a real invasion of some kind, because it's the only way to escalate what we've been doing already, which is what got us to now. The whole reason that for 45 years the U.S. didn't go to war with Iran was because this was the most predictable outcome. That if there was any major conflict with Iran, it would seize the strait and then get to open and close it at will, and to undo that would cost American lives and Iranian lives and a lot of money. And speaking of that, as part of this agreement, the U.S., according to Iran, has agreed to unfreeze $24 billion in assets, including direct cash transfers, with another possible $300 billion to repair the damage done by U.S. and Israeli bombing campaigns in the works. Here's how Vice President JD Vance explained that this weekend.
Walk through some of this. The Iranians are saying that they're going to have access to a $300 billion reconstruction fund. True or false?
Well, Ed, that's the sort of thing they could have access to, funded by the Gulf Coast Coalition, so long as they honor their end of the obligation. I think that one of the things you're going to see, Ed, and people have to be skeptical of this, is that the hardliners in the Iranian system will overemphasize the benefits that Iran gets while underemphasizing all the things that they have to concede and all the things they have to provide in order to get these benefits. So we absolutely...
So, yeah, that's how PR works. But also, wouldn't this be easier if the White House just released the terms? Because what it's meant is mostly at this point, JD Vance, who has technically been the lead negotiator on this, not the art of the deal guy, has had to go all over the place across media for the last few days to explain away what Iran has been saying instead of, just letting the American people see the deal. But more on that a little later. Now, Vance does seem to be telling the truth, that the $300 billion would come from the surrounding Middle Eastern countries in the Persian Gulf Coast, what we call the GCC. But Trump went on Truth Social and said it was entirely false, so who knows at this point? Either way, it looks like the U.S. is giving over at minimum $24 billion. On top of that, we have spent what is more than $111 billion on the war itself, according to congressional estimates starting back in May, meaning those numbers are probably low at this point. And that is on top of what Americans have spent on gas prices. Joint Economic Committee Democrats released a report earlier this month saying Americans have spent $43 billion more dollars on gas since the war started. So in the end, whenever this thing does end, Americans will have spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 billion for the war that the White House never justified to the American people, nor got approval for from Congress. And that number makes the $1.7 billion that was released to Iran in the 2015 Obama nuclear deal look like chump change. And that brings us to the question of a nuclear Iran. It has been the defining issue for the president that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons or a nuclear program or nuclear material. This is the part of the memorandum of understanding that has, at least according to Iran, not been fully hammered out yet. And if this agreement does get signed on Friday, the 60-day ceasefire will be about negotiating this. But what it looks like right now is that Iran agrees to never have a nuclear weapons program, but it could keep its current nuclear energy program, including whatever enriched uranium stockpile it has. JD Vance told NBC this morning that international inspectors would absolutely be part of inspecting Iranian nuclear stockpiles. That is, at least as it reads right now, identical to the Obama deal that Trump got rid of and allowed Iran to stockpile all this uranium. And it also undermines what Trump himself has been saying for months, and it also said just a few days ago on Truth Social about going into Iran to collect nuclear material, which he calls nuclear dust, because of the bombing last year that very much did not obliterate Iran's nuclear facilities. And then today, while in Switzerland for the International G7 summit, Trump all of a sudden started to downplay how important Iran having uranium really was to him.
And frankly, to go get it, we're going to go get it. But to go get it is a big deal because they say only China and us have the equipment where you can even get. The whole mountain is collapsed on top. We have cameras on it. You could make the case why you even bothering because it's not really valuable. It's it's probably $500,000 worth. It's not very valuable stuff.
So I think this is telling for a few reasons. First, it's not a confirmation that Iran is telling the truth about the deal letting them keep their uranium, but it's also not a confirmation. Second, and more importantly, it's Trump explaining to us how it was explained to him about why Iran should be allowed to keep this uranium, and that's that the transaction isn't worth all that much, which is completely counter to all of the messaging we've been getting about this war, which has been a nuclear Iran. Iran with access to nuclear material is a threat to humanity. Damn the cost to America, to you and your family. Trump was doing this to save the world. He said that as recently as last week. But it turns out he could be talked down from that by a P&L chart, which again brings up the question, what was this all for then? And for what it's worth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe all told the president in private meetings over the weekend they doubted Iran was telling the truth when it came to their nuclear program. White House sources who spoke to Axios described it as the way Iranian officials were discussing the deal among themselves was inconsistent with what they were telling the mediators and the U.S. Now, that doesn't mean they're outright lying, but it does mean they're not being fully truthful, which is bad in any international negotiation, but it's even worse when nukes are involved. Again, all of this could be cleared up if the White House would just release the MOU, but they aren't, at least not until after the official signing. And when he was asked about that today, here's what Trump said.
But I'll not only release it, I'll probably have a press conference and read it to you word by word so that the press covers it accurately because it's a very important document.
I mean, I'd be happy with that. Let him read out the terms of this agreement that he didn't himself negotiate. We'd all kind of be learning it together. It'd be like read aloud in class. Who knows? Maybe it's the unity we need right now. I don't know. Anyway, there are a few big hurdles for this agreement that could stand in the way even before this thing is signed on Friday. The first one is Israel. Trump has said that Lebanon is part of this agreement in a Truth Social post over the weekend where he lashed out at Israel for launching another round of missile strikes into the Lebanese capital of Beirut. Israel invaded Lebanon several months ago, and it's occupied around 6 to 10 miles of the country, which for a nation that's smaller than the state of Connecticut, that's not nothing. Now, Israel says Lebanon is not a part of any peace agreement here, and it's defending itself from the terror group Hezbollah, which operates out of Lebanon and also has a powerful political party there. Iran backs Hezbollah, and as of today, Reuters is reporting that Hezbollah has been told by the Iranians that Iran will not sign off on any agreement if Israel doesn't agree to retreat behind its own border. The Israeli media is now reporting that Israel has been kept out of key talks on the Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. and Iran, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised that Israeli forces will stay in Lebanon no matter what happens. That could risk this entire thing falling apart before anybody's pens touch paper this week. Second is the U.S. Senate. If an agreement is reached and the White House's talking points suggest it's better because Obama's deal was never a signed agreement, which is true, the State Department put that in writing in 2015, then that would make this a peace treaty, and that would trigger what's called the Senate's Advise and Consent Clause. Normally, we only hear about this when it comes to cabinet nominations or Supreme Court justices, but it also applies to treaties. Under the Constitution, while a president negotiates and signs a treaty, 2/3 of the Senate have to approve it before it can go into effect, otherwise it's not legal. And there are already more than a few senators questioning this deal. Among them, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who is the president's #1 cheerleader in the Senate. He wrote on Twitter, "I am somewhat concerned that Iran's view of the agreement seems different than what the American negotiating team is claiming. I believe it is imperative that the architect of the deal, Vice President Vance, and his negotiating partners be part of the process in presenting the final deal to Congress." Now, the fact that he's just outright throwing JD Vance under the bus there is worth watching because Trump keeps trying to cut Vance's 2028 campaign down before it ever starts. But also for Lindsey Graham, who has been one of the most aggressive pro-war senators, to say he has concerns about this, that's real. And then there's Mark Warner, the Democratic senator from Virginia, who was the vice chair on the Senate Intelligence Committee, who said no one has been shown the details of this agreement, and he's one of 8 people in the country who are required by law to see it.
Sort of the leaks and reporting on it so far.
I know Zippo. I know nothing more than you, and I think, frankly, even my Republican Senate friends have not seen any of this. You know, we do wonder whether this was timed for his birthday or to try to affect the markets today. We do know, I think, this is less than what it appears. And we knew at some point Trump was going to declare victory.
Mm-hmm.
So when this thing does hit Congress and the Senate, it could 100% upend things. The last hurdle here is time. 60 days is a long time to negotiate. It puts the deadline for this somewhere in August. There's reportedly a one-time extension built in for another 60 days, which would put the final signing date on October 16th, just 2 weeks from Election Day. Now, on the one hand, Trump's signing a major peace deal as the final bump for Republicans into the midterms could spark some enthusiasm to turn out Republican voters, which the GOP will need. On the other hand, 120 days or even just 60 days is a long time for things to go sideways here. I mean, not just with the deal, but outside of it too. We're going to hit hurricane season. The FBI just announced it thwarted a possible attack on the president's birthday fight night, so there could be something worse on the way. I don't want to wish that on anything, but it's possible. There's an infestation of deadly screwworms spreading across cattle in the American South, not to mention what could happen globally, and mostly the fact that while so much of the problems for Trump this term have been of his own making, the things that define presidential terms are often the things that they can't see coming, and every term has them. Between now and Friday is even a long time for things to happen. Hopefully we get more insight into this agreement. Maybe the White House decides to drop the full text. Who knows? But for now, it looks like there is, at long last, a deal to agree to make a deal by Labor Day to end the war. And that is the end of today's episode. Please rate or review the show wherever you get your podcasts. Like and subscribe if you're a watcher on YouTube. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where if you're a subscriber, I know there was no things you forgot from civics class yesterday. You are getting that on Friday. I have got a great interview this week with NYU law professor Melissa Murray, all about her new book, The U.S. Constitution, an Annotated Guide for the Modern Reader. That will be on the main feed too, but it is a things you forgot from civics class at its heart. And as always, share the show on social media. You can tag me at Grant Terms on Twitter, Blue Sky, and now on the SaySo News app, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you next time.